To our board members, this is Cindy. Can we start our video before we do our roll call? Make sure our videos are on.
Sure.
Which I know yours is.
Hi.
Hi, Monica.
And Cindy and Paula, I'm trying a little bit different setup today. I've got PrimeGov opened up on a different computer with a couple screens with the packets and things. So we'll see if that works. If not, I'll log in on my existing system.
Okay.
Are you ready to go from your end?
Everybody looks logged in. We're going to do video before the roll call. I don't see everybody. All of our members are in PrimeGov.
All right. I think I see all the videos. Are you waiting on someone's video?
No, I just didn't see Mr. Privet, but I do.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the City of Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting for October 1st, 2020, which is now called to order. If the meeting's disconnected at any time, the meeting will be stopped and reconvened once the connection's restored. If the connection's not able to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining on the docket for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting. The agenda and all the documents are located on okc.gov. For anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item or to speak under citizens to be heard, hopefully you've previously already notified staff by email. And if so, we will call on you at the appropriate time. We will call the case, then I'll recognize the applicant or representative to speak, and then I will recognize any protestants, and then we will close with the applicant speaking. The board will deliberate, ask questions, and then the board will vote. If you have not prearranged with city staff to speak on an item, I will regularly ask if anyone else would like to speak on a matter that has not signed up. At that time, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand on the device through Zoom on the computer, click raise hand, and you should also be able to lower your hand this way if you've already been called on or if you inadvertently raise your hand. On your phone, you'll press *9. The staff and the board will be notified that you've raised your hand if that's the case. And just note that if you've already prearranged to talk with city staff, then you do not need to use the raised hand function. These instructions are also included in the agenda if you ever need them. For speakers other than the applicant, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If we call on an item, if you call in after your item has been heard, or if you have a different matter to discuss, we will allow you to speak under citizens to be heard at the end of the meeting. When you call in, staff will mute your device. I ask that all participants, except for board members, keep their sound on mute until they are recognized to speak. To unmute your phone, press *6. Board members will be allowed to ask questions or make comments at any time during the meeting. Please do not interrupt board members while they are speaking because we need a clear record and it makes the meetings go by much faster if we don't have multiple people speaking at the same time. Before you begin your comments, please identify yourself by stating your name and address. It looks like this meeting is recording, and so we'll call the meeting to order. And Cindy, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Merchant.
Present.
Kitty Asbury.
Muted, Kitty.
Sorry about that. Present.
Mike Privet.
I'm present.
Mike Voorhees.
Present.
Monica Ybarra.
I'm present.
Okay, Chair, we have our quorum.
Okay. First item on the agenda is to receive the minutes from the September 17th, 2020 meeting. Do we have any changes or a vote? Or a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to receive the minutes from the September 17th meeting. Once you're available to, on your screens, cast your votes, please. And the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is continuous requests or withdrawals, and I believe that we have one.
One request for continuance today. It's item 7, case 14782. Applicant requests a continuance to November 5th meeting.
Okay, was anyone on the line that was hoping to be heard on that item? Okay, hearing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
Make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue case number 14782 as requested. Cast your votes, please. And that item is continued. Doesn't look like we have any items on the consent docket, so we'll move on to items requiring a separate vote.
The first item for individual consideration is item 1, case 14786. It's a request of Jared Fritz for a variance to the accessory building location and roof pitch requirements located at 4601 Oakwood Lane.
Okay, if the applicant's present, if you wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Yes, this is Jared Fritz. Address is 4601 South Oakwood Lane.
Okay, if you wanted to tell us about your application, please.
My application is for a variance to the setback rule. When I was initially doing my planning for my shop, I did not know that the rule was behind. There are many other houses in my exact area that have built next to them. So when I was building my plans, getting everything together, right before I was about to go up, I had talked with the planning department, and with what I had told him, he said everything looked good, just need to bring up the plans. That was the Thursday before COVID shut everything down. So as I figured I was good, I figured I'd buy my supplies and such before prices or shortage of supplies in general. Started framing out where I was going to build it, and then finally was able to get a hold of them, and they emailed back and forth the plans, and that's when I found that the plans that I had chosen were not to code. The only other locations that I could build because of the depth of my property and how far set back my house is would be on a very west end, which is on a downsloping area, which if I build anything up there, the runoff would end up running into my house. So the only other place would be where my storm shelter is, and that would cost $10,000 to get a new one, and however much it would be to have that one removed.
Okay, is your house set back that far back? Because it's
yes, it is. It sets 120 foot from the front of the road.
Yeah, there's no way that's required, right? That's
The setback on the house?
correct.
Correct. I have kids and I wanted a lot of driveway and yard for them playing so they didn't have to get near the street.
Okay. I mean, it troubles me a little bit that you went ahead and bought the stuff without getting the approval. I mean, I don't, you know.
What are the actual variances we're looking for? I mean, setback and pitch to the roof, I guess.
Yes, sir. And the setback is going to be 10 to 12 foot behind the front. So it's not anywhere in the front, it's offset.
JJ, what's the pitch and the code supposed to be?
So the
Well,
pitch is supposed to
should
be 412.
I'm sorry. Roof
I
pitch should be
apologize.
412. I think he's got a 212.
It looked like you had some letters, at least of not objection from some of your neighbors. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I've spoken with all the neighbors within the area. Had a chance to get that to them. They said if I brought them something to sign, they would have no problem. Actually, I've had multiple neighbors that one helped me go get the supplies. A couple of them were helping me do the framing on the foundation, and a couple of them are going to help me build it whenever I do end up building it.
And is it possible to put this where the pool is?
That would be right in an area that would cause flooding. That would be right behind the house.
There's a comment here on the application that just says that it looks like you could fit it somewhere and comply with the code. So did you want to address that?
The only place I could put it is basically where the storm shelter is. Other than that, I could put it in the backyard, but with the slope from my back porch to about 20 foot to the west in the backyard, it goes about a 3 to 4 foot pitch up to the property line. So without massive groundwork or I guess a lot of drainage problems, that the only option would be in the north side of the property.
And JJ, is that comment in reference to it possibly going where the storm shelter is or somewhere else?
I think that comment is just looking at the size of the lot. Thinking it could go further back, yes, behind the house or where the storm shelter is. It doesn't look like it would fit on the southeast corner. That's where the well is.
If it was me, I kind of prefer my shop to be over my storm shelter, but that just be me.
I mean, is that possible?
It sits up, 2.5, 3 foot out of the ground. It's not a flat shelter. It's a extruding shelter.
Well, how far back can we get this shed to get it as close as we can to that back rear line of the house?
I mean, I could get it. I mean, whatever would be a safe distance from the shelter, 5, 10 foot from that. And that would probably scoot it back 20 foot.
Okay. I mean, that was my thought on if we were going to approve it, it would be something like that, just getting it as far back as possible. I don't know how to write that into the variance other than, I guess, the number of square feet from the rear property line.
Also, in some of the documents I sent, I did send another application. It's one of the actual houses that I'd seen that gave me the idea of how to build mine. And that is right in flush with the front of the house as well. It was on, I believe, Westminster Road.
Okay. Yeah,
and then actually 2 houses, or I guess the house directly north also has one in line with the front of the house.
So here you got it at least rendered as 81 feet from the rear property line. And you're saying you could move that back about 20 feet. Is that correct?
I could move it further back towards the storm shelter as long as it doesn't get to where you're impeding the entrance and exit of the storm shelter.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think if you could do 60 feet from the rear property line, that's 20 feet back. That's still, I think, getting it as close as we can. If you wanted to come back and confirm that, or if you think that's, if you're prepared to do that today or something, we can talk about that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. One board member.
If I can't go with the original, I mean, that'd be the best option going forward.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Yeah. What's the north variance we're looking for? How much?
The north variance, 25 feet is code.
And you're at 25, right? So you don't need.
Correct.
Okay. You don't need a variance.
No, sir.
Is there anyone else signed up to speak on this matter? I don't have anyone on my list, but if there's anyone else that would like to speak on this matter. Okay. Hearing none, board members take questions, comments, or a motion.
Mr. Fritz, did you say that you're okay with that 20 feet? Moving it back 20 more feet?
Ma'am, I would prefer to go with the original location. It'd be easier when pouring the drive too, but if I have to, I could.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to address here is that we need to be approving, if we approve something, that it needs to be the minimum necessary to help you achieve what you're trying to do, but is the least amount that we need to do. And so I just didn't see an exact number in the original application of what you were requesting feet wise. So to make a motion, I wanted to verify the answer to your question from Mr. Merchant earlier about the 20 feet. If you're okay, prepared to move forward with that today, or if you want to go back and measure and come back.
I'd be okay with that. The only real issue I have is just the distance from the shelter to the building. But if we can go ahead with that 20 foot, that would work today.
Yeah, I think that puts it, the motion would be, it's approved so long as it's built no more than 60 feet from the rear property line. Right now it's drawn up as 81. So that'd be 21
Okay.
foot difference.
Then
Then
I
if
will
that is,
make that motion.
Monica, before you motion, I want to ask a question real quickly.
Sure.
Did I also hear you state, Mr. Fritz, that you could move it forward and make it flush with the house?
No, ma'am. I was just saying that it is 12 foot from flush. The two houses that I've actually looked at their design and how they built theirs, which are about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from my house in the same zone area. Theirs are, one is flush with the front, the other is set back in the manner I want. It's about 12 to 15 foot setback from the house front.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And the reason I was asking, because you stated that it would be easier if you were able to pull into the drive from that location. So do you really want to consider maybe doing that before we make a motion?
With all options, that would be my first way to go. But if that's going to be a possibility that it gets denied, then I'd rather go with the other, unless both options are possible.
Yeah, and Katie, we're just trying to get it as far back to that rear property line as possible, just to meet what Ms. Ybarra said about the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship. So.
Okay, thank you.
And the ones that were flush were other properties in the area, which they might have variances, they might be, there's different requirements. So we're not sure. They could be in violation, who knows?
So with that understanding, then I would make a motion that we approve the application with the condition that it not be more than 60 feet from the rear property line.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the two variance requests in case number 14786 for the reasons they meet the statutory conditions for variances. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please.
Sir, was that question for me?
No, just to the board.
Apologies.
Sure. And Mr. Privet? And it's approved.
Thank you, board, for your consideration. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Item 2 is case 14784, request of Gavin Baker for a variance to permit construction of 3 homes with no primary access from an approved street located at 4604, 12, and 20 Southeast 128th Street.
Okay, is the applicant or representative on the line? Got Mr. Baker signed up to speak. Cindy, do you know for sure if Mr. Baker is on the line?
I do see him. I think he's muted.
Okay, Mr. Baker.
Now I don't see him anymore, so I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, we'll wait a couple of moments and then we'll skip on to the next item. Okay, we won't continue this item, but we will push it to the end of the docket. So JJ, if you wanted to call the next item.
Excuse me, Mr. Merchant.
Yes.
We do have a hand raised. I don't know if it's regarding this case or potentially the applicant.
Oh, that did not pop up on my screen, but are you able to unmute them?
Yes.
Got 2, I think.
I've asked them to unmute.
Yeah, this is Gavin Baker. This is Gavin Baker. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't get my phone unmuted. I finally figured it out.
Oh, sure. No problem. Just wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Yeah, this is Gavin Baker. The address there would be 4604 Southeast 128. And this variance would just allow me to build on the 3 5-acre tracts with just a private easement driveway, without the proper frontage road requirement. Because to access this property, you're driving about a half a mile of gravel road. So if I put in the new private road, and then it has to be paved, it just doesn't seem reasonable to go half a mile of gravel and then go to a paved that wouldn't match the rest of the neighborhood. So I would just like to be able to access private, just with a private easement driveway to access the other 2 properties.
Okay. You do mention the application that maintenance, you need to work with the Property Owners Association on maintenance. Did you want to address that point?
Yes, I've met with several of them from the neighborhood there, and they have a little bit of deed language in their stuff that just kind of puts you responsible to help and pay keep up with the private existing gravel road. And I would be willing to definitely attach myself to that to help out with the road and everything else like everybody else.
Okay, we had, I think several people signed up to speak and some protests. Did you want to address any of those protests now before we move to them?
I really don't have a ton to say about the protest other than it doesn't seem to be all to be true. The one protest that I've seen, she seems to speak for the whole neighborhood, and as far as I know, I think she's one of the only ones that are opposed to it. She says she lives in the neighborhood and she doesn't even have a home. She just owns a piece of property. She seems to think that we would cause a lot of harm via the gravel road and dust and stuff. And I mean, that's consistent with the rest of the whole neighborhood. Everybody is all gravel road and gravel driveway. So I don't know. It just doesn't really seem valid to me, some of the stuff she's put on here.
Board members, any questions for the applicant? Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to call on the first person on your list that's signed up to speak. And I will say to the folks that are signed up to speak, well, we've got a clock now, but try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if you can group your comments together, or if someone's already mentioned your comments, those will be in the record. So, try to keep your comments to unique comments that no one else has mentioned yet. But Cindy, if you wanted to call on the first person.
And we have Justin Baldridge.
Okay. Mr. Baldridge, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Justin Baldridge. My address is 4601 Southeast 128th Street. My property sits directly to the north of the properties in question. Honestly, I think that this would be the best use of the property. 3 homes, I think, would be better than, there's oil field stuff kind of around us, and 3 nice homes would be a lot better than an oil field yard or, a storage unit or some other things that have been rumored to possibly go in here.
Okay. So you're speaking in support of the application?
Yes, sir.
We appreciate your comments.
Okay, next we have Nancy Van Camp, and I do see that she's on the line.
Hi, this is Nancy Van Camp, and my address is 13400 Country Lane. I live at the entrance of this neighborhood, right off of 134th and between Sunny Lane and Sooner. I think that Mr. Baker has worked with us very, very diligently to get us to approve his access to it, and him working with us to build in accordance with the houses out here. There's no small houses out here. They're all nice size homes, and we're all on 5 acres, and he's been bent over backwards trying to work with us. So I think we should support his gravel road. I have a gravel road running down the side of my house that's been there ever since I've lived here 15, 20 years ago. And it's not going to change, I'm sure, though. It just wouldn't seem right. He's in the back of the neighborhood at that. So you have to go a half mile down on gravel road, turn left, and go a quarter mile up a gravel road. And it just wouldn't make sense to put a paved road in there when the rest of them are gravel getting back to there. So that's my take.
Okay, thank you.
And we have Paul Mcguire, and I see he's on the line.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Paul Mcguire. I'm the president of the Country Lane Neighborhood Association, and we have been working with Gavin for some months now to look at his request. His request, as it relates to us, is to be allowed to use the private right-of-way, which is Country Lane and Southeast 128th Street. To allow him to access properties that are immediately to the west of our subdivision. We've made one such accommodation previously, and that was for Mr. Baldridge, actually, who built and came to us and requested the same access. And so the association has looked upon this favorably The question before the board, of course, is whether he would be granted a waiver for the paved road frontage. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the association. I'll just my own personal opinion. It is that a gravel road access or frontage to his properties would be consistent with the neighborhood. And it is my opinion that most of the residents in the neighborhood would prefer that, or would certainly be in favor of that. I think what you've heard from at least one protester is that the residents would not be in favor of that. And that's not my impression at all. I work and know all of my neighbors quite well, and I don't believe that's the case. In fact, we had a meeting with Gavin back on June 30th, if I'm not mistaken, that was the date. And we considered the question of whether to grant him access. And of the members who were present, which was a quorum of our members, a 2/3 majority actually favored granting him access, understanding that his plan was to have gravel frontage for those properties. So I'm speaking in favor of the application, and hope that you will vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Joe Carey, and I see he's on the line.
Chairman, you may want to say his name again.
Yeah, Mr. Carey, I saw that you were on there and you were unmuted, so you should be able to speak. Okay, Cindy, if you wanted to go to the next caller, we can remember Mr. Carey and call on him later.
Okay. Cody Terhune, and she's on the line.
Oh, well, I've got a Dylan Terhune with the hand raised, so maybe Cody Terhune is on that line.
I see Cody on the line. She's unmuted.
Yes, Dylan Terhune is the one to speak.
Okay.
How you doing, guys?
Good.
I'm Dylan Terhune. I live at, or I own property at 12909 Country Lane. Be directly east of the access point for the property he's requesting. Going through the all of the paperwork we have here, and several of the people that their properties back up to the new road he's planning to put in, we have talked to, and they are verbally against what he's doing, just to creation of dust that's going to be going on. The meeting was actually on June 20th, and the item was tabled pending Gavin come back with some more information to what we're going to be talking about. So there was not a majority vote reached in that meeting. With that being said, with the access from our property, or from 128, my property is the corner portion right there where he would be entering into those three houses, those three subplots. And all of my paperwork, I don't have any reservation of easement for him. And I didn't know if he could provide something with a reservation of easement to that property. And that being said, I'll just very strongly against the amount of dust that would be kicked up. and I'm not willing to give him any of my property for his access to the land or the road he wants to build.
Okay. Any other comments while we've got you?
We also, in that meeting, requested him to explore other actions or other access points, which there is a area off of Sunny Lane. I didn't know if he would be able to access. Like I said, we requested him to, we tabled it for him to come back with more information, and we're yet to get to that point.
Okay. I've written those down, and I'll raise those with the applicant whenever we have him speak again.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Terhune.
Okay, Joe Carey.
Mr. Carey, it looks like you're here and unmuted, but we cannot hear you, so. Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to move him to the end of the list again.
Okay, we have Kevin Baker.
Mr. Baker, are you on the line?
Yeah, Gavin Baker's here. I'm not sure about Kevin.
Okay. We'll give some time for Kevin Baker to see if he can get situated. If not, we will skip him. Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to move on.
Okay, Shirley Denson.
Hello?
Yes, Ms. Denson.
Yes,
Okay. If you wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present your comments.
I do, but not for this case. I'm sorry. I didn't sign to speak on this case.
Well, if you have any comments on this case, no, I'm just kidding. It looks like, well, Cindy, are you through the list for this case?
I'm through the list, and I do show that Robert Blackwell has raised his hand.
Okay, Mr. Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. Did you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to voice my strong opposition to this case. My wife and I live on Country Lane, 13101. It's a very dusty, private gravel road with a neighborhood self-imposed speed limit of 15 miles an hour. We do that to try to keep the dust down. Our residence very close to the only entrance, and therefore most of the traffic passes our house, so we get a consequence, and we get most of the dust. If 3 new houses are allowed to be built and use our neighborhood's private road, then traffic would increase anywhere from 6 to 10 to 12 cars, depending on the number of people living in the residence. And this wouldn't include the traffic from construction that barrel up and down the road. That's going to take many months to finish the construction on these houses, and we have to live with the consequences of the dust. My suggestion is to pursue another means of providing access to these properties, maybe off Sunny Lane. I don't know if he can make it or not, but If you should decide in favor of Mr. Baker, I would respectfully request the board to mandate the same requirements and restrictions on his properties that we have listed in our properties abstracts. Once again, I want to strongly express my opposition to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Cindy, if that's everyone, yeah, I think we've got Joe Carey left. Mr. Carey, we've got you acknowledged, but we cannot hear you. We'll give you a few more seconds to try to get it situated. If not, I don't think there's a chat function, but we'll try again at the very end to see if we can get a hold of you. Okay, is the applicant on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, if you want to address those comments, and particularly, I've got the easement issue from Mr. Terhue, and several of the protests have mentioned a possible access off Sunny Lane Road. So if you want to address those.
Yes, if you see in the application, I'm not requesting or needing to use anybody's property for my, what would be essentially nothing but a driveway. That would be all on my property. As far as the right of way, there's not another reasonable spot for right of way that I know of off Sunny Lane. That's all commercial oil field companies that you would be, I don't know, they probably wouldn't even give you access, but you're going to be driving through an oil field parking lot, you know, and then it's also to the west of the property. That's all low lying, there's ponds, and it's a big like swamp down towards the very west of the property. The existing owner of the property has been accessing the property through this road, you know, all this time. I'm only actually would only be adding 2 houses because there's already one existing property there that's been used for the past 20 or 30 years or maybe longer. I don't know. Is there any other ones that I missed?
I think the primary concern with some of them is the dust issue. So I don't know if you want to address that, and or if paving this would be an option.
As far as the dust issue, I mean, you're going to be adding 2 more households to the road. I don't feel like the dust is going to be any different than it is today. I mean, you're going to add a few cars, but it's everybody's road out there is gravel. And then as far as paved, if you pave it, it just doesn't seem reasonable to me, because you're going to drive a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile of gravel to a paved driveway. So, and really my gravel driveway isn't gonna, with the property running, the driveway would be running north and south. So chances of that, my private driveway dusting anybody, that's probably going to be very slim to none. Trying to think what else. So yeah, I mean, I think the private easement driveway is the way to go to match the neighborhood and make everything look uniform and be just fine.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions or comments or thoughts?
How far does his private drive need to be off the property line? Is there any requirement?
Right there, it would be on the east side of the property, right around in that 60-foot range, just heading right down the east property line.
Right.
My
question's probably more for staff. I mean, is it allowed in the use 5 acres? just to be there on the edge like that.
Yeah, the road would be just there adjacent to the east property line.
Well, I'll get my comments out there. Some of the objections, I don't know if they're necessarily going to defeat the application, because the decision before us is not necessarily whether it has to be paved or not. And so, that said, I think there's a corollary question of, if we grant it and it's going to be gravel, what problems does that cause? And so I think it's still a thing that we have to think about, whether if they agree to pave it or if we require that they pave it or whatever. But the variance is not a variance between paving it or not. So that, that goes into the analysis. And I don't think it's, we don't have to require that it's paved, but I do think that that would go a long way toward some of the cohesiveness of the neighbors, and it would address, virtually all of the concerns of the neighbors that are having a problem with this, dealing with the dust that might be on their property, particularly the neighbors that are kind of on those corners that are going to be getting a lot more traffic than the others. I think they'd prefer to have that paved. So, I don't know how.
But we would be driving. We would
sorry.
be driving down their existing gravel.
Hold on just a second. We'll give you an opportunity to talk in just a second. I'm just talking to the board members right now.
Okay.
So board members, that's kind of where I see it. I don't know where your kind of temperature is right now on this application, but those are kind of the issues that I see.
As I had a question maybe for JJ as to let me pull this back up. It says that the properties were previously created as 3 separate 5-acre tracts for construction of a home on each tract. Am I understanding this correctly, that's I guess how they were originally created, but there's only ever been one on there? So now he's asking for permission to build 2 more? I guess I'm kind of confused as to if the go ahead.
If you look at the map, he's got 3 5-acre tracts that make up 15 acres. So the entire property now is 15, and then the 2 splits to create the 3 parcels are shown there on the map. So he's got adequate access to the 15 acres, but to create these other 2 parcels to the south, he needs street frontage for those.
But did they not exist before?
No, I believe the road, I can't see what it is, on the north, dead ends into the 15 acres. So he's got access there to the 15, but to split these other 5 off to the south, they don't have any street frontage at all. So his request is to create a private easement coming south along the east property line to access those other 2 5-acre tracts.
This is Kitty. My question is, are there other properties in that neighborhood where it's partial pavement and the rest gravel?
Yeah, if the applicant knows the answer to that, feel free to let us know.
As far as I know, all the driveways in that neighborhood are all gravel. They may have an approach in front of the house, but I'm pretty sure every one of them is a gravel drive.
I did see one hand raised, Mr. Terhue. Well, now there's a few more. So, Cindy, if you wanted to go through the raised hands.
So Nancy Van Camp.
Yeah, I have a concrete driveway. My concrete, and I'm at the front of the entrance of the neighborhood. Every car goes by me. Every car goes by me. Every car leaves me dust. And that the people that already live there leave a lot of dust. But this sits to the east, I mean, to the west of our main section. And I just don't understand them being upset about gravel road when that's what we live on. Mine is one of the few houses that has a concrete driveway. Eric does too. Eric has a concrete driveway. And I believe mine and him are the only two. Oh, Melvin Sexton down there has a part of a gravel driveway. But it's just this is stuff that the people complaining about the dust mainly don't even live out there. I live out there. I know what the dust is like. So, but that's part of country life. This is all a gravel road. So that's it.
Thank you.
So we also had Dylan Terhune again.
Yes.
Did you raise your
Can you hear me?
hand?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, if you're looking at the current diagram that we have here, 128, that's my property right there, at the north side of his entrance. That entrance is about a car width and a half wide. That's what I mean by I'm not going to give him any more property to make that entrance any larger. With that being said, also, what about drainage? If he's planning on putting that road directly on the fence line, is there not a buffer he has to put in for drainage or any type of thing like that? Or is he allowed to build just right on the fence line? That's a question for the board. And then also on the other picture you guys have, where it's more of just a handwritten drawing, at the bottom off Sunny Lane, it says 660. Keep going. Right there, where it says, Sunny Lane, where it says 660, that is access. There's access right there to his property, pretty much right where that line's at.
Okay.
Whose easement is that? Is there an easement there?
I believe there is. There's a business owner. The WM, you can see the road makes like a little cul-de-sac. That road actually goes all the way back.
Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to call on the next person.
Paul Mcguire.
Well, thank you again. So just addressing the board's initial question about whether there are other paved drives in the neighborhood. There are a handful of properties that have paved turn-ins from the gravel road, but of course the full length of the gravel road, both gravel road, Country Lane and Southeast 128th Street are gravel. The other issue with providing ingress to those properties by another direction rather than the existing right-of-way is that it would remove the current property owners in the subdivision from having any say in terms of the manner of construction that'll take place on those properties. And this was an issue that was discussed in depth at our last meeting. So as it was noted by one of the previous speakers, we all have language in our deeds that bind us to certain covenants and restrictions. And just as we did with Mr. Baldwin, we granted him access to a right-of-way. He agreed to have that language added to his deed. This is the same thing we've asked of Mr. Baker, which he has agreed to do as well. If he's required to provide access by another means from Sunny Lane or possibly even Southeast 134th, then the neighborhood is removed. We have no influence, and pretty much anything could happen on that property that could conflict with the character of the neighborhood. And that's not something we're going to be in favor of. I once again, let me just back up and say I'm speaking for myself, but I feel I have a strong sense of what the residents in the neighborhood feel. We have a strong interest in ensuring continuity here, and that includes not only ensuring that language is in the deed to to ensure the construction and so forth is consistent with the rest of the neighborhood, but that the road itself that accesses those properties is consistent. So once again, I hope that answers the question, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
That's all the hands that we had, and I see Mr. Joe Carey still on the line.
We'll give him one more shot.
Okay.
Mr. Carey, you're recognized. And I believe you're on mute, but I will try to unmute you. Okay, says you're unmuted. So. Sounds like we're still having issues with that. So
yeah, I can. He sent an email that says, "My name is Joe Carey. I would like to speak in the meeting tomorrow concerning the adjustment request that's connected to my property. I am protesting this adjustment along with every single property owner in our neighborhood. Thank you." That's what he submitted by email.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So I think his views have hopefully been encapsulated by some of the other protestants that have spoken today. On to Ms. Ybarra's point, there is under the favorable considerations, it says the 3 tracks are pre-existing since the early 1980s, but were not provided primary access. I think that to me kind of tends toward an argument that for some reason there was an intention to provide primary access and it was never done. I assume that primary access probably would have been gravel. And I've got to think that this configuration is probably consistent with how it was intended, and it just never got developed, and people kind of got used to it not being developed that way, but it was initially supposed to be developed that way, it looks like. Board members, any questions or comments?
No, it seems like it's the area to me. I mean, being 5 acres.
I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, it seems to fit the area to me. These are 5 acre tracts. They're not trying to split them up or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion would be whether we want to add any requirements like it's paved or anything like that. So if the board wants to, I'm sure we can talk about that. But if not, I think we can probably take a motion.
I'll move that we approve the variance request as requested because it meets the statutory requirements. And I would not include in my motion any additional requirements for pavement or anything like that.
I'll second it.
Okay, and I've cut off discussion already. And so we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance in case number 14784, the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Cast your votes, please. It's like Ms. Ybarra. There we go. And it's approved. Right. Thank you, Mr. Baker. I think we're, JJ, ready for the next item.
Item 3, case 14778, requested Lifetime Homes for a variance to the 25-foot side yard setback in the RA district located at 12308 Thelma's Way. And Dave Johnson is the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, are you on the line? So we've got a couple of hands.
I see Caitlin is on the line. I believe she helps represent Lifetime Homes.
Correct, yeah. So Caitlin, looks like you've been permitted to speak and unmuted. So if you wanted to present the application.
Yes, my name is Caitlin Deason, and I'm representing Lifetime Homes, and the address is 12308 Thelma's Way. And we are basically our case was deferred last time around, just based off of not quite enough information for you guys to approve or deny the variance for the side yard setbacks. However, we have gathered a few more pieces of information for you, as well as some photos of the property and the property lines itself. We have submitted a new floor plan for you guys with a different setback. So on the north side of the property, the original setback was around 9 feet. Now we're at 14 feet, 9.5 inches. And then on the south side, we're at 8 feet, 2.5 inches with the rework of the floor plan. And then we also, if you look at the photo that's up on the screen, you can see the side yard setbacks, but then you can also see access to the back of the property from that back road. And then on the north side of the property, that's where that drainage ditch lies. And about 20 feet back from the property to the north, you'll see that in the other photos, it's a whole list of photos. Yeah. So you'll see that the properties next to the 12308 Thelma's Way have a significant drop off of minimum, I would guess, about 20 feet. And so I know the question was how it would affect the north side property owner if they were to ever build there, but you can see that there is a significant drainage easement right there. And so just wanted to present new information for you guys to see if we could get this passed.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate this. This is much more clear, at least to me. And
perfect.
The substantiation there on the north side with the drainage ditch, I think gives me comfort, and the fact that it's now only really about a 10-foot variance, because your setback, according to you, would be a little over 14 feet. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, 14 feet, 9.5 inches.
Okay. And then we've got the letter here as well, talking about that property to the south, that it's not going to be developed. So that makes me feel more comfortable as well. So
perfect.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Nope. I think she knocked it out of the park this time.
Yeah,
thanks,
the
guys.
pictures made a difference.
Okay. Was there anyone signed up? I don't have anyone, but is there anyone on the line that was hoping to speak on this matter?
This is Brett Leach. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the property owner. I think Caitlin did a wonderful job. Probably not a lot more needs to be said. I walked all those properties on Monday with the developer, Colin Spencer. And what Caitlin said about the north property line is absolutely true. According to the developer, there is a drainage ditch, more like a creek, with a severe drop off to the north of my property. So anyone that's going to build there would have to be at least 30 feet from that property line, and it would all have to be piered. So the chances that they would build close to that drainage is very, very limited. And then the opposite side is obviously Commons area, and we've got the letter from the developer indicating it will never be built on. So thank you to the board.
Okay. No, thank you. That's helpful. It sounds like, based on the topography of the land, if anyone builds to the north, they're going to exceed the 25-foot setback and at least have to build 30 feet. So that's helpful here as well. Board members, any questions, comments, or a motion?
If there's no protests, I'll move approval.
And I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variances in case number 14778 for the reasons that they meet the statutory conditions for a variance as revised in the supplemental documents that we've received. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please. And the application is approved.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Item 4 is case 14785. It's a request of Bad Apple Equities for a variance to the minimum lot width of the R3 medium density residential district at 318 Northeast 15th Street. David Box represents the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Box, you wanted to present the application?
Sure. Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Cindy, could you display the photo of the current structure? So while Cindy's doing that, this is a bit of a unique application in that if you're familiar with this area, it is kind of a mix of different zoning categories. You've got your traditional single family, you've got R3, you've got R2, you've got some office now that fronts on 13th Street. I want to touch briefly on the comprehensive plan. I know that is not a document that is often described and talked about in this setting. Mr. Privet, in his role as a planning commission member, obviously deals with that significantly. The reason I'm bringing it up is this area of Oklahoma City is designated as urban medium under the comprehensive plan. And what the comprehensive plan tells us about urban medium is that it anticipates development at higher densities and more intensity than you might find in other parts of the city. In other words, this is an area of the city that the comprehensive plan, through that lengthy process, has designated for higher levels of density. It's reflected in the various zoning categories that exist within this neighborhood. The image that you see before you is the original structure, and it is a fourplex. Under R3, a fourplex is a permitted use. That is what is there now. So the question before you really is whether or not the applicant should be able to remove this house, which unfortunately through years and years of neglect has been left into a state of disrepair, and rebuild it with a new structure that would allow for a fourplex. So in other words, we're not intensifying the use. We're simply trying to build a new product that we think will be a good use for the neighborhood, but allowed to be a new build. So when you look at the hardship, I think it is that we have two things: a historical use of a fourplex and zoning that allows exactly what we're going to do in terms of density. But the lot, when it was created, is only 50 feet. Now the lot was created prior to the zoning from all the research that I can find. So we have an issue that is created not by our own fault, but by something that came in after, and that being the zoning. So what is peculiar about this property? I think it's what I just described. It's that you have a historical use of the property for a fourplex, and a zoning category came into being that requires a lineal frontage that we simply don't possess. It's worth noting, if you look at the zoning map, there are multiple other R3s in the neighborhood that also have the same length of frontage. There you go. All of those R3s that are single lots likewise lack the same frontage. So relief, if granted, would not cause substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes of the comprehensive plan. Back to the comprehensive plan, I think this is exactly what the comprehensive plan is desiring: increased density in the core of the city. What the comprehensive plan is trying to combat is the flight to the suburbs. The more development that we have out in the suburbs, the harder it is for the city to service those. It makes sense for the city from a policy standpoint to encourage density within the core, because that is where all of the services are already available and not having to be extended. Finally, the minimum necessary element, we do meet all other code provisions. And that kind of leads me into the question of the protest. We did have an opportunity to go visit with the protest. My client had a meeting on site this week for anyone that could attend. The protest came in a little late, but we were still able to make that happen. There was some confusion, I think, with what our application was seeking. There was some discussion about zoning and intensifying the use. And my understanding is that my client was able to explain that we aren't seeking to intensify the use. We're simply seeking to build a new house. There was questions about parking and you'll see that in your protest that is before you, and perhaps even if there are people on the line. As it relates to parking, again, I would just emphasize that we meet the parking requirements of R3. We will meet all other code requirements. So parking to me is a non-issue because we meet what the code prescribes that we have to have for parking. There was discussion about the size of the structure and windows. Again, we meet all setback requirements. We meet all design requirements for R3. So the only thing is that issue is this idea that we have this existing fourplex and we don't have the required frontage. And so we believe that all things considered, and Cindy, you might show the image of what we intend to build.
Are you talking about this one?
No, it's the front elevation, the colored elevation of what we're going to build.
Cindy, I don't think I've seen that one either.
I haven't either. I was curious.
There it is.
Sorry.
Oh, that's new.
Oh, you're okay. So what we're coming back with is something that if you're familiar with the area, we think this is architecturally in line with what you might expect. It looks very traditional. This is a very old traditional neighborhood. So we think that all in all, this is a much better scenario for the neighborhood if we accept the fact that there will be a fourplex there, and there will. We're simply asking for the relief to allow us to build a new structure that will remedy some of the problems that exist with the existing structure. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board would have. If there are protesters, I'd like to be able to address them after that. I do want to emphasize for your consideration, if you look at your staff report, which I know you have, staff found no unfavorable considerations and 2 favorable considerations. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
My only kind of question before we get to some of the other folks that wanted to speak was looking at this zoning map, which Cindy, if you wanted to bring that back up, maybe just to make it easier. I agreed with you. I think, you know, this has been there long before this was zoned, but it looks like there's this kind of very specifically, deliberately assigned R3 and a little bit of R2 up there. But in this area, mostly R1 and then some very deliberate R3s mixed in. That makes me think this was very deliberately zoned R3 with probably this circumstance in mind, that when it gets rebuilt, it'll be rebuilt as a single family. So that's what kind of gives me pause.
Well, I mean, if the intent was to make it single family, what they would have done is zone it single family and created a non-conforming situation so that if it ever got rebuilt, it would be required then to be single family. To me, I think it cuts the other way. If they wanted it to be single family, the city, when they introduced their zoning ordinance, they would have zoned it single family. The fact that they chose not to and still to allow it to be R3 tells me that it was a conscious decision to allow something other than single family.
That makes sense, but it doesn't really explain why it's R3. Why do you, I mean?
Because that's historical use of the property. But what you're describing is something that does happen, where the city comes in and zones something and they will intentionally zone it in a manner that they believe appropriate. If that means that it creates a non-conforming, then so be it. In fact, the non-conforming can continue in perpetuity. This one could too. We've just believed that what we have is a better product for the area. The non-conforming rules exist so that if you intensify the use or if there's a lapse, then then it goes away and there's a prescribed way in which that happens. And there are situations like that. In fact, when I worked for the city attorney's office, my very first trial was an appeal from the Board of Adjustment on a non-conforming issue. And so there are intentional ways that the city would seek to get rid of a use. And here it would have been to zone a single family.
So this is just an oversight?
No, it's not. I don't think it's an oversight. It was an intentional zoning of R3 because what has historically been there has been a quadplex. An oversight would have maybe been single family. I mean, I don't think it was an oversight. I think it was very intentional.
Well, but we've still got the reason we're here today, the fact that it's 50 instead of 100 when it should be 100 under R3. So that's what makes me kind of trying to figure out at least what kind of happened here
Sure.
to make this.
I think they didn't have a zoning category perhaps to assign to it. And the R3 just happens to have 100 feet. Perhaps we're giving too much credit to the decision makers at the time as to whether or not they really dug into the weeds as much as we think that they may have when they were considering R3. I think it was as simple as, this is a quadplex, let's make it R3. And that was it.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments?
It looks to me there's only one R3 in the area that gets close to 100 feet.
Yeah, they're all 50 feet.
about the
In
same.
fact, the one at the corner of Stiles and 15th, I don't think is 50 feet. I think that one's 75 feet.
Yeah, and it's still not 100.
I got a question probably for JJ. If the applicant was going to simply repair the property, would we be here?
No.
Okay. We're here because he chose to propose to tear it down and rebuild a replacement.
Yeah.
Tear it down, everything starts anew.
Yeah, so that's kind of my point is, we're really not here to decide whether or not a quadplex is appropriate. It's whether or not a new build that I think will inject some life into the neighborhood is appropriate.
Board members, any other questions or comments before we move on to some of the other folks that wanted to speak? Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to go through your list.
I have Joel Harder.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I lost my clock, so I'll just try to do my best. We submitted a letter. I live in the house immediately next to 318. We submitted a letter, gathered 35 signatures, 32 different houses, properties, and a lot of what has been discussed. We agree with that. A lot of the lots look very differently, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of where these R3s are. But ultimately, we believe that the 100-foot width rule is good. And if the board would do a little more research into this neighborhood and come and see this lot in particular, I believe you will discover there is great wisdom in it. It's a vibrant neighborhood, and such a structure simply is not suitable and would pose significant risks. We really appreciated the opportunity to get to visit with the owners of Bad Apples so they could share with us that plan. The plan that they believed really would be the most profitable for them, which is a quadplex. But I believe, having bought it sight unseen, they're mistaken. A proposed 8-bedroom complex, and I give 2 quick reasons. This proposed 8-bedroom complex has every likelihood of bringing 8 vehicles into this single property. The north side of the street is already not allowed to park by the city. It would create a very narrow street. There's about 13, 14 kids that play in the neighborhood. So street parking would create visual hazards and pose a real safety risk. And as you said, sir, we're not talking about 20 feet that it's lacking. This is half the width required. And this is part of, I think, the wisdom is if you're going to accommodate that many potential parking vehicles, you need that kind of space to actually navigate. Appreciated that Bad Apples, they kind of wanted to respond to that issue by recommending a parking lot in the back that they said they plan to put 10 spaces. I certainly do not believe a parking lot is part of what the city has in mind for this neighborhood, and the comprehensive plan of higher density, I think post-COVID may be revisited. The zoning issues seem to come afterwards, and perhaps maybe the zoning issue is what should be revisited. But it is simply not realistic to think that 8 unrelated tenants would coordinate navigating a narrow driveway to park. But most importantly, it's the issue of precedent. You look at all of these other properties that are zoned as R3, and I would ask the board to consider and look into that a little more, because of all those properties, most of them don't have anything on them. And of those that do, this is the only property that has historically been used as a multiplex. And it's been used in a very, very poor manner with revolving door of residents that created a lot of opportunity for illegal activity. I would imagine that those residents weren't executing actual leases, and they were exposed to really poor living conditions. If you just, the precedent really is not the fact that there are quadplexes here. If you look 2 doors down, homes like this have been beautifully, carefully restored for a profit to the developers. And we appreciate the investment, but I would urge the board to consider whether or not they are standing on precedent, or are you setting a precedent, one that the neighborhood, the people of this community humbly and respectfully, but overwhelmingly oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. And did I hear correctly that you're speaking on behalf of all these folks that signed this?
I'm not. All those who signed it are certainly agreeing to what we put in the letter. But I believe others are joined to speak, and so I would not speak for them if they want to add something different. But certainly those 35 who signed the letter are in agreement with what we stated there.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that, and everyone else watching. That's why I tend to give people a little bit more time than the 3 minutes if they're representing kind of a group of people,
Sure.
Rather than having the entire group speak. We have one person speak, and then they get a little bit more time. So that's why we kind of allowed you to go over. One thing I will ask, just since you do seem to have a protest that's in line with this, is what is your response to the fact that they're just simply replacing virtually the same structure that existed before?
Well, I don't believe they are replacing the same structure there was before. And again, look at the precedent of other properties. This is a historic looking home, and just 2 doors down, the home was in the exact same condition and was beautifully restored. And this neighborhood does not have an issue of suburban flight. There are actively residents moving into these homes. And I loved what they shared as far as the elevation and the visual. And I don't know if you can see my screen, but that visual has wonderful green space and trees. But the reality is it's going to completely consume that lot and be sandwiched in by my house and the house that'll be next to it. And the belief that cars are going to park in the back is simply, I don't believe, realistic. And so that visual, while I appreciate the desire to invest and beautify the neighborhood, I don't believe that is actually maintaining what this neighborhood is and what it will has every opportunity to become.
So just, and I'm grilling you a little bit as I would an applicant, because I think you can handle it. But hypothetically here, let's say that they did not put a new property there, a new kind of quadplex with 2 rooms, and they kept the same structure, and 2-3 people moved into each unit. Each person had a car or 2, and you've got 6 cars, maybe 8 cars. How is that different from what they're proposing?
Well, it's dramatically different because again, I based upon what the Bad Apples told us, their desire was to basically maximize their investment to be able to build something that they believe would be nice enough that they could garner higher caliber, higher socioeconomic status tenants. And basically what they told us was, if we have to do that, then we would have to invest most of our resources into simply bringing the house up to livable conditions and not be able to charge as much. And so I think they're just simply looking at this purely from a position of profitability. And I'm 100% in favor of making wise investments. But I enjoyed getting to meet and talk to them. And I am very well aware of the investment that's going in this neighborhood. I believe there's other options, other opportunities of how they can invest in this neighborhood, invest in this property, and maximize their investment. certainly we're not opposing the reality that if they want to go in and try to make it a quadplex, that they can with this one, but to create what is not really the same property on that lot, but it's very much dramatically enlarged and, you know, residential, I mean, multi-residential commercial looking property with a parking lot. That's a significant difference. And the property that is there, quite frankly, is better and has a better future opportunity, because we know that these properties can be restored and made into beautiful homes that people want to buy and move into, because we just welcomed a new family 2 doors down 3 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I thank y'all for your service.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, we have Shirley Denson.
Ms. Denson, hopefully we've got you on the right item this time. If you wanted to introduce yourself and present your comments.
Yes, hello. How is everyone?
Doing well.
Thank you for your time and your service. I'm trying to calm myself down because I'm very passionate. And I have a tendency to get a little loud. But first of all, Mr. Box, we have life in this neighborhood. We don't need you coming in here injecting life. And the next point I want to make is that the home that Mr. Horter was referring to is 312 Northeast 15. And that's where we got the new neighbors, and they have 3 children and 2 dogs. And the children are outside all the time. I say that because there's a heavy population of children right around 318 Northeast 15. And so I also wrote a letter, and I will refer you all to the letter. And thank you for your time. And I also want to say that apartments bring a transient nature. We got strangers, and we have to worry about not only the tenants, but their visitors as well. They're not going to have a place to park multiple cars on that street. You can only park on the south side of the street. And so we just don't need that. We just don't need that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alan Bennett has raised his hand.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, I'm Alan Bennett, at 233 Northeast 15th. So I'm just across the street and down a few houses from the applicant's home. I want to just bring home the point that Joel started, both in the staff report and the applicant's comments. I sent a belated protest letter today. I don't know if it made it to the board or not, but in that, the applicant states that this is just one of other multifamily homes used in the neighborhood. And then in the board recommendations, favorable consideration point number 2 says there are other multifamily units in the neighborhood. This is not true. I don't know if they didn't do their homework or misleading or whatever. We do have, you saw the map, we have 15 R3s in the neighborhood. 9 of them are empty lots. So obviously they're not being used as multifamily units. And of the 6 remaining, 4 of them have been converted to single family home use. And 1 of them is used as a daycare. So that leaves the 6th one, which is our applicant's house. It is the only 4-plex on an R3 lot in our neighborhood. So I got the feeling that they were trying to convince the board that, well, you should allow us to keep or honor our request for an adjustment, for a variance, because there's other houses in the neighborhood doing the same thing. Well, that's just patently not true. There's nobody in our neighborhood with that multifamily. I mean, they're all single family. The ones that used to be 4-plexes have been converted. There's only one on 15th Street that has a single family house in the front with a few apartments in the back, but they're not being used as an apartment. They're being used as family storage now. So nobody's got a multifamily house in our neighborhood. My point in my protest letter, if you haven't read it, is if you are to approve this, you're actually feeding the developers, or sort of fueling the fire for these developers to come in to buy up these 9 lots and say, oh, look what you did for Bad Apple over there. You allowed him to have a reduction in his 100-foot width to 50 by half, and so you should allow us to do it too. And frankly, as nice as this new house looks, it's a row house. And we just really don't want row houses in our neighborhood. Duplexes would fit nicely on a 50-foot lot, even a triplex, but fourplex is just too much building on too small of square footage. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Holmes that has raised their hand.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I am Holmes McKnight. I live at 315 Northeast 15th. However, I missed the meeting. I was not notified that there was a meeting at the Harders with the owner. Let's go back to 318. I would like to address the question that was asked. Let's just say he would fix it up as it is and it becomes a fourplex. I was notified that the street is not a public parking. So if all those cars get the parking on the street, that leaves us no alternative but to call action or dial 911 and have those cars removed, which we have done and we still do when cars are parked illegally on our street, because you just cannot get through. The street is still too narrow. And there's no way to park in the back as it is, standing as it is. And if you are to make it, you leave us no alternative but to continue to call the police, dial 911, to get those cars removed, because there's just not enough room on that street for any type of fourplex. In the past, as it stands as it is, living in that area since 1988 and was in that area as a child, because of the type of renters that was placed in there, the majority of them did not have cars. So parking was not an issue when was rented as a fourplex. Most of them was low income, and so they didn't have cars. And we also had to call the police when they had company, because they would park on the street, leave it there for hours, and we just could not get by. So the street is not a public parking place. And I just think as a fourplex, they will park on the street, it will block the street, and it will become a hazard with the children that has moved into the area. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Brian Sweeney.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
This is Brian Sweeney. I'm at 325 Northeast 15th Street. I will be adjacent to this property. And just to summarize what everyone else has said, this may not intensify, as he said, the use of the property as is, but it will absolutely intensify the traffic. And that just speaks into the logistical and safety challenges that everyone's talking about. And even you can see from the zoning map that you have there, the fact that this is even an R3 in the first place is, I don't know how that came to be, but certainly I'm opposed to this becoming a complex. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we have Nicole Lee has signed up to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for allowing me a couple of minutes to speak. I don't have a lot to say. My neighbors have made some really great points. I stand in solidarity with them and everything they've said. I want to make a couple of points just to reiterate the fact that of all the R3s that are zoned R3 in the neighborhood, this is currently the only one that is being used for a multifamily residence. And also want to make the point that the home was not built as a fourplex. This is a single family residence that the former owner chopped up and basically rented rooms out of and called it a fourplex. So it has the footprint of a single family home. And I mean, really, I can't imagine that we can squeeze a different structure in there with a huge parking lot. I'm sorry, I didn't mention my address. I live at 317 Northeast 14th, and my backyard backs up to the residence in question. So our backyards meet, which is where they want to put a large parking lot. I can't remember the man's name, the Bad Apple owner that we met with the other day, mentioned 10 cars. I just do not see how that's possible. It's not a large backyard. Even 8 cars, I don't think would fit. I'm not crazy about the idea of my backyard, my lovely backyard, backing up to a parking lot. But anyway, I think I've made my points. And I also want to just state that I know that we're zoned, or our neighborhood, as Mr. Box pointed out, is zoned for a higher density. And we have, multiple R2s. I think that increases density already, that are, zoned that way. And a couple of things that are being used that way. We just had one, get approved where a guy's going to build a duplex. We have a duplex that's just been built on Walnut. So the density is there. There's an apartment complex that's been there for 100 years on 14th and Walnut. So I don't think that this is a good use of the space. And to go from 100-foot to a 50-foot, variance, I just think that's too much to ask. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Chair, I don't see anyone else that's indicated they'd like to speak.
Okay. I saw a hand up on Amy Ayers, but
Yeah, she lowered it.
maybe someone already got to her comment. So Mr. Box, if you want to address any of those comments.
Sure. So I'll start with parking. In looking at Google Earth, it looks like one side of the street may be parking off limits. On the south side, it looks like there's no parking to corner. But again, I think parking is not a relevant argument to this discussion, in that the R3 code has requirements for parking, and we will meet all of them. As it relates to precedent, I don't believe that there is precedent in zoning cases or Board of Adjustment cases. I think each case stands on its own merits. Perhaps my job would be a lot easier if there was precedent and I could just point to the last time I got something approved and sit down. It doesn't work like that. If there is any precedential effect here, you have I think a very unique set of circumstances because you already have a quadplex. So really the question is, can we build what we think to be a more compatible looking quadplex and get rid of the quadplex that has just been, unfortunately, left to sit and just left to disrepair. There was a question about the design. It's really not, it's not in a design district, so I don't think that really has relevance. But again, no unfavorable considerations by staff, and this is going to be a quadplex. And I think a lot of the concerns stem from this idea that perhaps it could be a single family house and converted to that. And that's just not what's at issue. We think that the alternative that we have provided is a better case scenario for the neighborhood. There are several other developments going on in the neighborhood, so I didn't mean to impugn the neighborhood by saying this would inject life. I think, frankly, this is acknowledgement that this is a very desirable area for people to live. And that's why this particular client has acquired this site with the eye of building a very nice product in this neighborhood in hopes of attracting, tenants that would likely be students or residents at the OU Health Science Complex. So with that, we'd ask for your approval. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have. But I think Mr. Voorhees was the one that correctly identified the issue of it's this quadplex or the other quadplex.
Yeah, one kind of comment on that point. I think the neighbors aren't entirely out of line by just having the opinion that they would rather a single family or a duplex go there rather than a quadplex. Like they have an opportunity here to express their views while this is being built up from the ground up.
Sure.
And while that's happening, I think they're within their rights to just say, yeah, we'd rather it be a duplex or a single family.
No, yeah, I get it. And, these core neighborhoods, which I live in one, I live on 15th and Walker. These core neighborhoods are kind of unique in that this is how we used to design neighborhoods for generations. It wasn't these big blocks of only single family. If you look at my neighborhood, which is Heritage Hills, you've got single family, quadplexes, triplexes, apartment houses. You've got all the different types of living quarters within one neighborhood. That's how we've always done it until about the 80s and 90s, when we decided, well, we've got to have multifamily on their own and single family on their own. And I don't know that that's a good way. I think through comp plan, through planning OKC, the goal has been in these core areas to re-inject that into them, that there is benefit in having different types of people, different types of income levels, different types of structures, all within one area, that it makes a more diversified and more whole neighborhood.
No, I agree with you there. I like, all kinds of different developments going in an area. I think that adds a lot of value, especially from a city's perspective. I like that. I understand people that want a big front yard or backyard, and I understand people that want more density. So,
sure.
I'm definitely sympathetic to that. Cindy, it looks like we've got Amy back with a hand up, and then a couple other comments. I did want to mention to the folks on the line, I know generally we earlier in this meeting, we kind of went back and forth a little bit because we wanted to flesh out a couple of issues, but normally we don't have kind of a back and forth where if Mr. Box or the applicant says something and someone has a comment on that thing, we go back and forth for an hour. So I see some hands up that have already been up. So we'll recognize you at this point, but this will be the last time that we'll take comments from the protestants. So Cindy, if you wanted to go down your list now.
Amy Ayers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the time. With all due respect to Mr. Box, he continues to indicate that this would simply be a quadplex replacing a quadplex. But as indicated earlier by a fellow neighbor, that's really not the case. The existing structure is originally a single family home, and in that size of a footprint. And also the comment about, so previously we understand that there was no unfavorable consideration by staff, but I believe that the neighbors have brought forward information to you all today that maybe you were not necessarily aware of previous to that. And then my last comment is, Cindy, if you wouldn't mind bringing up that application board of adjustment, that map of the neighborhood, would you mind bringing that up really quickly?
Would this be the different zoning?
It's the one, I don't think it's the zoning one. It's the one that has the layout of all the houses. The zoning one is fine too, though. It really doesn't matter. I wanted to show something on that map.
This one. Is this the map you're inquiring on?
Cindy, you need to share.
I don't see a map. I just see you all, actually, Cindy.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So it actually is the other one, the one that has a title of application for Board of Adjustment by the applicant. It shows the actual drawing of the houses.
I think she's talking about the kind of parcel map from our board packet. It's got the whole neighborhood.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Cindy.
It's okay.
Well, that works. That'll be fine right there. Okay. Yeah, I think it's one up from that maybe. There you go. That one right there. That one right there. So if you see the the property in question, my house, I'm at 317 Northeast 14th, is immediately south So my property line butts up there to the south of this particular apartment, proposed apartment or quadplex. If you see my backyard, there's a very short amount of distance right there between the back of my house and what is proposed to be a potentially 8 to 10 car parking lot. Again, for the center of a neighborhood, I just wanted to bring that to your attention to see where the location of those buildings are in relation to what would potentially be a parking lot. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Then we
Yes.
had Mr. Harder once again.
Yes, and I'll speak just very quickly, because ultimately, I hope what you're hearing from all of my neighbors in this community is that we are actively seeing this neighborhood grow, and we all are desiring to invest into it and help it to grow and make it better. Mr. Box made the point that these cases don't depend on precedent, and precedent is not an issue. But then he cites trends and history. And so I would just simply say that if you do want to look at what is the trend, what's the history, the trend and the history is that this neighborhood is beautifying, this neighborhood is developing, this neighborhood is growing better. And the proposal that we are seeing, while we appreciate the desire to put a new structure that would be nice, this proposal specifically is not going to continue this trend, not going to continue the recent history and the progress of our neighborhood. We don't question the way it's zoned currently or the ability to renovate and restore that property and use it however the owner wishes. I do believe, though, that really this has come down to a quadplex or a quadplex, and that's their decision, their position. But there is so much happening in the neighborhood, and the proposal that they're putting forward and they shared with us graciously is not going to help the neighborhood continue this trend. Ultimately, there's wisdom in the 100-foot rule, and all the objections raised show there is wisdom in the 100-foot rule, and it seems that it would be misguided to ignore the wisdom of that 100-foot rule. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Shirley Denson once again.
Street was only limited no parking on one section, but just to clarify, that entire street from Walnut to Stiles is no parking on the north side of the street. And also, I wanted to make the point that what you're intending to bring, we already have. We have professionals that live in this neighborhood. We have doctors, nurses, an engineer, teachers, all sorts of people, working people. Another thing construction brings, especially a large job, is all the noise. We work, we get up, certain time, go to bed, certain time. We're kind of construction weary right now. We've had so much going on. And also, what about the children? It's way too many children living around the area of the proposed site. And that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. And that's helpful. I did think that the one side of the street was blocked off to parking and the other side was not. So thanks for confirming that. Mr. Box, if you had any follow-up to any of those.
Just what, so, we've talked a lot about the frontage. I want to make sure we're all clear, though. We're not talking about size of lot. Like, the city's code allows for a quadplex on this size of lot, right? We meet the minimum lot size. It's just the way that the lot is oriented. So we're not seeking to increase the intensity for what this size of lot was deemed appropriate by the city. It's just that the way that this lot happens to be oriented. So we would ask for your approval.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments of Mr. Box before we talk about this ourselves?
I I have a comment, and maybe Mr. Box wants to respond to this, so I'll just put it out there now. I understand what you're saying. I mean, a lot of your points are resonating with me, but one thing I would like you to comment on is I understand that what you're saying is this is a kind of increased density area. This is the intent of the comprehensive plan, but as I view it, I don't think necessarily that that's the primary concern, particularly if it's going to impede, at least according to all of the proposed neighbors, so much. Everything from parking to the parking lot to being too close to the increased density, even though it currently is a quadplex, but it hasn't been used that way for a while. All of those things. So I would just.
And really quickly here, I think maybe
Yeah.
your speakers are on, and so we're getting a bad echo that I can somewhat make out, but it is very distracting. So.
Is that better?
Is that better?
No, there's still an echo.
I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Everyone, so I don't think it's anyone else's computer. So I think it's yours.
Sounds like a plane taking off.
Is that any better?
No, but it sounds like maybe we'll just have to deal with it.
We're overworking my computer.
Is that any better?
No, we'll just have to deal with it. It's we
I'm
can.
sorry. I'll speak up a little. I'm almost done. I would just like Mr. Box to address that. I understand the intent of what he's saying, that this is the intent of the comprehensive plan, but I guess my question is to what detriment of the area, of the neighborhood, and particularly considering all these concerns that the neighbors have brought. So I'm going to mute now.
Sure. So I guess we just agree to disagree in terms of the detriment. So again, to me, the parking is a non-issue. I understand no neighbors like parking on streets. We deal with that in every neighborhood. My neighborhoods that I'm, trying to get zoned, or adjoining neighbors worried about that. But again, we're not seeking a parking variance. We are going to provide the exact amount of parking prescribed by the city code. So I don't think complaining about parking is a legitimate concern in this application, given that we are going to do what the city tells us we have to do in terms of number of parking spaces. And in terms of, the density, I mean, this is exactly the density that is allowed under the zoning code. We're not seeking to increase the density. This has been developed in this manner for a long time. The zoning code has existed as R3 for a long time, presumably as long as everyone that has lived there. And so when they sought to buy their house, if they would have looked at the zoning map, you'll see not only is there a lot of R1, but there's a lot of R2. There's a lot of R3 spread out. The south side of this block is lots of R3. So I think this is exactly what one could have anticipated would have been built there. So I don't see their concerns as, or I don't see what we're going to do as causing a detriment, because I believe that it's exactly in line with what the zoning allows for.
Mr. Box, if you know, is there another zoning that would permit this in this configuration?
A quadplex?
Yeah, on the 50 foot.
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to think if there, or Mr. Privet or JJ, if there's something, but
Not a quadplex, no.
I could think of maybe 2 or possibly 3.
The way it sits right now, you could build a duplex, but for a 3 or 4 family unit, the 100-foot lot width comes into play.
The irony is we could build the same structure and just call it a duplex, right?
Yes.
So, but if we can have the parking, I think we mitigate what that increase in density creates.
yeah, I mean, to me, it upon first read, and this is more so to the board, the board's deliberation, but to me, upon first read, it seemed like a planning commission issue. But if there's no relief at planning commission, I don't know if like even a spud or something would resolve it, then maybe it is an issue for this board. So
Spud would resolve it, but because it's just a singular issue, I think if I went and sat down with JJ, I think what he would tell me is, why wouldn't you just go to the board? And I think if I went to planning commission, you use spuds and puds really when you've got a host of ordinances that you can't meet, and you're really trying to either mix uses or create something so unique that instead of coming here and seeking 5 variances where you guys tell us to go get a spud, they'd be saying, why aren't you getting a variance here? It would appear as if we were like forum shopping under that. I think the Board of Adjustment is the correct path when it's just a one issue within the code, and objectively, or I guess subjectively, I think we meet the criteria set out in the statutes for the granting of a variance.
yeah, and it's not a clear call to me, but to me, just initially reading the application and even through this meeting, it just felt more like a planning commission issue. And I know it's only one thing that you're trying to get around, but it's a huge thing that you're trying to get around. And it's really kind of, to me, fundamentally changing the character of that piece of property and in the surrounding area in a way that gives me a lot of hesitation for the Board of Adjustment. I'd feel more comfortable if this were, if I were in planning commission or something deciding this, I'd feel much more comfortable, but I just have a lot of hesitation on the Board of Adjustment.
Understood. If you think about what you're doing though in a planning commission, you're seeking to change the use. We're not seeking to change the use. The use was a quadplex and it will be a quadplex. We're not seeking to change the use. That's why you go through the legislative process when you're seeking to change the uses allowed or the nature of the use on the site. That's not what we're doing here. The nature of the use won't change. The use of the site will not change. We're simply trying to build what we believe to be a better product than what is there now.
Yeah, and it'd be a close call, I think, either way. But to me, I think it's getting closer to changing the use. And obviously, it's still going to be residential, but it's a quadplex versus what everyone around it wants it to be, which is single family or maybe a duplex. Plus the parking concerns. Plus, no one really can tell me, and I'm not even sure why this is R3, which seems to be specifically deliberated on being R3 when everything else is R1. The other R3s in the area don't share the same characteristic. No one's really been able to explain that to me. So for all those reasons, it just feels more like a planning commission issue because they can either get to the bottom of it or make it up because that's what they're able to do on the planning commission that we're not able to do.
So
that said, I'm only one member of the board and I've been outvoted before. So if the rest of the board feels comfortable with it, that's 4-1. But
what I'd say is I think like planning staff would even say that when this process is available, we don't want to PUD and SPUD the whole city, right? Like there's a very clear path to go seek a variance here when it's a one portion of the code, and perhaps we disagree, but I don't see how the parking is a legitimate concern given we're going to meet the code requirements for parking.
Yeah, I mean, if it is a Board of Adjustment issue, I would want some other things changed in order to meet that third criteria that we have to meet under the statute, which is the relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes, intent, and the comprehensive plan. And so, I'd want a couple of changes or assurances or working with the neighborhood if this is a Board of Adjustment issue that I don't think are satisfied here. And I understand that you disagree, but I'm just telling you that's kind of where I am. If it's not a Board of Adjustment issue, then that can all be dealt with by the Planning Commission. But if the board feels like we need to decide this, I'm not currently in support of it. The board can outvote me on that, or we can continue it and talk about what things might need to be changed in order for at least me to be comfortable with it. All that against the caveat that I'm only one board member. So the rest of the board members, do you have any questions or comments?
I thought I was on board until I saw that elevation. That was the first time I've seen that. It just seemed like a pretty large fourplex there, David, replacing what is now kind of, a pretty small structure, it seems like.
So it'll be the same height. It'll be the same massing. It's just the scale that you're looking at. It may be different. But again, it meets setback requirements, height requirements, size requirements. It may be deeper in the back, but from the front, it won't be altogether different.
And we have no idea how long it's been sitting there non-conforming or how it got to be R3 in the first place.
My belief from everything I found is that the structure, I think, predates the zoning. So this structure came in before the zoning code existed.
And but it would have been single family at that time, right? Or it was non-conforming then.
No, we believe it was a quadplex when the zoning code came into being, which is why they zoned it R3.
And some of the neighbors dispute that, though, that it was ever a quadplex. So.
That would have been,
It wouldn't make any sense that it was zoned R3 unless it was.
What, 3 mailboxes on it?
I mean, the city they don't go and randomly zone things R3 in the middle of a single family neighborhood unless it has historically been a quadplex. And in these old neighborhoods, much like mine, it is not uncommon to see multifamily dwellings in the middle of single family homes.
Other board members, questions or comments? Okay. I don't know if there's someone's thinking about a motion or anything else they'd like to see. I mean, one of the things that always comes up in some of these more contentious applications is whether a proposed development meets other aspects of the code. And from my perspective, I understand that argument, but at the same time, if you're trying to get a variance and trying to, from my perspective, take something for yourself from a neighborhood, there's an argument that you need to give a little bit as well. And so even if you meet a code requirement, if all the neighbors want you to do something, there might be an opportunity for a concession there and to give back to the neighbors since you are taking something from the neighborhood by getting this variance. I don't know what that would be, but I'll just put that into the mix as well.
Well, that's what I'd ask. I mean, what are those concessions? Because again, the parking for me is just, I don't understand the concern. Because it is a public street. I think one side of the street you can't park on. I think the other side of the street you can. I drove down there today and there were cars parked on that side of the street. It is a public street. It is not a private street. It's a public street and cars parked there. My guess is that these neighbors sometimes have gatherings with family and friends. And my guess is that those people park on the street. That's why we have public streets. My client's a very reasonable developer. I haven't heard anything specific other than we want it to be single family. And while I can respect that, it is zoned in a manner that allows for something other than single family. But if there's specific things, I have no doubt that my client be willing to listen and to consider them. I'm trying to talk long so my client can respond to a text message to see if he wants to continue it. But I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything specific like design elements or things like that, but those are certainly always on the table.
Yeah, and I'm always hesitant to do, design elements for a variance for obvious reasons. But if the applicant's willing to do it to appease some neighbors and things like that, then that's something to talk about. Or maybe the board's comfortable with it as is. Who knows? But board members, any questions, comments, or a motion?
Mr. Box, are you still waiting on your client to find out if you want to continue it?
Just if he has any interest, yep.
Did you want to maybe kick this? I think we have one more agenda item.
Well, are there any other comments from the board? Just, I know my client is listening that could help, inform his decision.
I hope you can hear me, Mr. Box, and that you don't hear the airplane going off in my computer right now. But from my perspective, one of the things I know that you're in front of us enough to know that we often tell applicants, is there anything that you can do? Can you go back to the drawing board to where you maybe won't even need this or as much of a variance, or particularly where there is a lot of protest? And so as what I hear you say is that your client obviously is investing in this property, wants to maximize, and I think was shared with the neighbors, wants to maximize the return on their investment by making it a quadplex rather than single family. But that could also be done with a duplex, maybe not to the same extent, but is that something that they're even, I mean, are they willing to consider that? I guess I get it that it is a quadplex and that's somewhat persuasive to me, but at the end of the day, the option is they can redevelop or model what is there, not even need to be before us, as I understand it, or if you do, you're going to need this, and there's all of these objections. And so I feel like there, maybe even other elements of the statutory conditions. Is this an unnecessary hardship? And is this the minimum necessary that can be done to relieve that hardship? And so I'm just struggling with it on different, if you want just some feedback from board members, that's mine. And that's just some of the things that I'm struggling with as far as the statutory element.
No, understood. Yeah. So what makes it difficult is that it's not a vacant lot, is that it already is a quadplex. And so, if we were negotiating with the neighbors, it's just hard. It's hard to come off our position, given that it already is a quadplex and it will continue to be a quadplex. We just think that a new build is a better scenario for the neighbors. We're not going from a blank slate to asking for a quadplex. We already have a quadplex. And so it makes it a little difficult. Now, if there were subtle things, we can meet with the neighbors after this, if it were approved, and try to work with them on final design things. But the foundational issue of quadplex or not, there's really nothing we can do on that, because we can't spend the money on a new build to lose density. The numbers just don't work. But I understand, I'm consistently, whether it's in front of this board or planning commission, trying to find middle ground. This just happens to be one of the more unique cases I've had, in that we are asking for relief, but because we're trying to build something that we believe to be better than it's there, because what we want in terms of density already exists today. So it makes it hard to negotiate against ourselves, so to speak.
David, is this fourplex occupied fully, or is
my client spent a lot of time removing tenants that were there, that were problematic tenants, that were engaged in activities that we believe to be detrimental to the neighborhood. Some of the activities that were ongoing within the structure led it to be in the state that it's in. And that's why we believe the better money served is to build back a very nice, attractive quadplex and kind of move past the problems that existed within the structure.
Yeah, at the same time, that may, neighbors be a little leery of this place because of that.
Sure, for sure, because some of the activity has been really bad. This client is a client that has a long track record. This particular entity that owns it, Mr. Perry, for your, for your sake, it's 3 Jacks. You've seen 3 Jacks come in front of Planning Commission probably every single time here recently. They are a very active developer in Oklahoma City. They build a very good product. They do single family, multifamily. They do kind of run the gamut of it. So here you have a developer with a stronghold in Oklahoma City that's been here for quite some time. And we're hoping to move past some of the problem issues that existed in this house. My client would like a vote. He did respond.
Yeah, I'm always sympathetic to the argument that when there are this many protests, you're not gonna get everyone on board, even by talking to them. So I understand that as well. But I think maybe there are some things that can be done to ameliorate some of these concerns. If we take a vote today, I'm a fan of density when it makes sense, but I could not support it. But I'm only one board member.
Understand.
Board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
This is Kitty. I'm having some really mixed emotions on this one, big time. Even though I heard that it is a fourplex and it has always been, but it seems like I heard one of the other residents say that when it was originally built, it was a single family home. And now it's sounding more like, which I'm all for redoing neighborhoods and building new homes and stuff because it ups the value of the property for the current people living there. But it seems like this is truly more of a business than it is a residential home. And I think that's some of the concerns of those people that were on the calls earlier. And the variance is a huge difference that you're asking for.
So in terms of business, this will be residential in nature. There will be no commercial aspect to it. It will be.
I know that part. I understand that. But as a home owner, I think some of those people think it's going to be like a business for them, for the persons that's purchasing the property. And that's what it is. It's a business, but it will be people living there in their homes.
I'm not sure I follow.
More so like a hotel.
No.
Like it is.
Yeah,
No.
or I think your criticism is in line with the neighbors that are thinking that you're going to have this.
And that's what I'm saying, is their feelings. That's what I was getting from them. That's why I'm conflicting. But Mr. Box, I totally understand your point of view. That's why I'm so conflicted with the neighbors too.
To that point, we could build this as a single family home and run it as nothing but an Airbnb. So maybe we got a special exception, or a rental. Just because it's a single family home does not ensure that it is owned by the occupant of the home. It just doesn't. You can rent anything anywhere.
Looks like it should be HP, but it's not. No.
Lucky them. I wish I was on HP.
I'm ready to vote. I'm kind of like Sam. Frequently, I'm a cult of one, so I'll move approval.
I'll second, just to move it along.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance in case number 14785 for the reason it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please. And it's not approved.
Thank you.
Well,
wait a minute.
City staff, I think for this, it's not technically denied. That motion just did not carry. And so, well, first I'll confirm that that's correct. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That was a motion to deny, to approve that failed. So now you have to have a motion to approve and see what happens with that.
Or a motion to deny.
This time
A motion to deny, yes.
Okay. So we have a motion to deny the variance in case number 14785. Waiting for a second.
I'll second that also.
Okay. And a motion and a second to deny the variance. In the case, cast your votes, please, for the reason that it does not meet statutory conditions for a variance. And so for this one, you would vote to approve if you don't want to approve the application. And that motion is approved. So the application is denied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5 is case number 14783, request of Crabtree Homes for the variance to the accessory building regulations in the R1 district at 7725 Davis at Drive.
Okay. Is the applicant on the line?
Yes.
Okay. If you wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Yes, I'm Tommy Crabtree, and I'm actually the builder for the property.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about this application?
We're going to build a shop, and the property, it's wider than it is deep. So the shop is at the back of the property. It's just not behind the house. It's as far back as we can put it.
I think the only question I had on this one is there a reason it can't go where on the rendering that it identifies as a pool is going there, other than you want a pool to go there?
Well, there's a pool there, and then so there's.
Oh, it's already there?
What that?
The pool's already there?
Yes, the pool's already there, and actually, if you put it on the other side, on that south side, there's another house. So it put the shop almost like right in someone's front yard. There's some trees, and so then like where we have the shop located currently, the neighboring property, they have 5 greenhouses. So we're kind of backing up to where this is kind of where it's tucked out of view for everyone, and kind of backs up to some greenhouses.
And then the only variance here is on the rear wall, is that correct?
Yes, just because of the way the house is and the property is, you just can't, put it behind the house.
Okay. Was there anyone else signed up to speak on this matter? Or that wanted to be heard? Okay, board members, any questions or comments of the applicant?
Is the structure already built, or is it?
The shop is not already built. No.
We appreciate you coming in ahead of time instead of building it and then asking for forgiveness, which we get sometimes.
Yeah.
It looks to me like it hits all the elements. I mean, I think it's a peculiar piece of property. The orientation is very unique. I think you're doing the best that you can to tuck it away. So I can support it. Board members, I don't know if you have any questions, comments, or a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application for a variance for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance in case number 14783 for the reason that it meets statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please.
Monica has to move it first.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to that screen. I don't know where it disappeared on me. Oh, there it goes. Sorry.
There you go.
Hey, Miss Key, mine is not clicking on it, but I'm clicking it.
Disapprove because it's a technical.
It's not clicking.
I can click it.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please.
Clicked right on.
There we go. And it's approved.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, sir.
Next application is number 6, case 14774. Special exception to allow home sharing in the R4 district at 11427 North May Avenue, Unit A.
Okay, is the applicant on the line?
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Hello.
Now, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, the reason why we are here is because we are applying for
Well, can I
home
stop you really
sharing.
quickly and just get you to introduce yourself by name and address, or else the city attorney will come after me.
Okay, our address, my name is Monica Limbira, and our address is 11427 North May Avenue. The apartment is the Unit A.
Okay. And then if you wanted to tell us a little bit about your application.
Yes, we are applying for the home sharing application. We fully remodel the apartment, and we are intending to do it for short-time rentals, but not actually exactly like 2 or 3 days. We want to do it a little bit for a month or more than a month. But the reason why we're applying for the home sharing is because we have to do it through Airbnb. Airbnb requiring the home sharing application and have all the licensing and all the permit in order to do this.
Okay. That makes sense. I was looking at this and it looked like you wanted to do the longer term, and under the city's code, if it's, I think, longer than 30 days, you wouldn't need a special exception. But I guess if Airbnb is requiring it, then that's why you're here. And
Yes.
also you'd be able to rent it for shorter periods of time if you wanted to, if you get the special
Yes.
exception.
But if we can, we will. But our preference is do it for a little bit more than a month, because we believe that the people won't destroy the apartment and it will be easier to maintain. And we just spend a bunch of money to trying to make the apartment really nice and look really an up, apartment. So we don't want the people to just go for 2 or 3 days and just kind of like destroy the apartment. We invest a lot of time and effort on the apartment. So we are trying to target executive or nurses that are coming, out from a different state and want to clean a nice place to stay. But every place that you want to advertise, they require the home sharing license now. So that's what we are applying for it.
Okay.
At the beginning, we have a problem with the parking permit, but when we bought the apartment, they don't have any restriction for the apartment. They don't have how they call it. They don't have any apartment. They don't have any restriction with the parking. So I believe when I bought an apartment, at least I have one parking for myself. But as I said on my application, now I'm paying for an apartment that I already got my parking permit. I'm paying for one more additional. So I don't want to bother nobody in the complex. So now I'm paying for an additional one just to avoid any inconvenience with any of the neighbors. So I'm paying for one, and I can have my own rules and restrictions. And the restriction is just one car when they are renting the apartment, but actually I'm allowed two, I guess. But I'm paying for one just to avoid any problem with anybody. So I got my tag already.
Okay. And are there any issues with the overall owner or any kind of overarching authority that
no,
has
at the beginning they were concerned for the parking. They didn't know how we are going to do it, but as soon as I explained them how we are going to do it, they were okay with it. At the beginning, they were a little bit concerned. That was kind of like a misunderstanding. They think that we are going to rent the apartment for different people at the same time, which doesn't make sense. But that was my fault because I didn't explain correctly. But now that that issue has been resolved and they understand how we are going to do it, everybody's okay and they accept it. And they gave me a letter accepting that. They gave me a letter granting me permission to do that, the homeowner association. So I believe I include the letter on all my paperwork.
Okay. Yeah, there's usually restrictions against subletting or using Airbnbs or things like that. And so, but if you have I mean, it's not required for our purposes, but I would like to know if it's going to cause any problems later on down the line, and it sounds like it's not. So
yeah, and I guess anything that we have with them has been resolved, and they grant us the permission.
Okay. Are you? I know Mr. Voorhees did this in one of the recent special exception applications, but are you willing to accept all these conditions that you put in your application as conditions of a special exception?
Those are our rules. We can set up our own rules, and those are my rules. It's just going to be if a family is going to stay, it's going to be 2 adults and 2 children, or we will prefer, an executive or, like I say, a professional or a nurse that want to start for a long period of time, because the apartment is located close to 2 hospitals. So that's what we're trying to do, kind of like a high-end apartment just for executive. But those are our rules, and we can set up the rules, and they were okay with it.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make sure if we put this into your special exception, they're, in addition to being your rules, they're a condition of your special exception. So if any of these are violated, you risk being in violation of your special exception and getting that revoked. So for example, you put no smoking, no pets.
Yeah, no smoking, no pets.
If you don't advertise it as that, then
Yeah.
potentially you're in violation of your special exception. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that.
Yeah, no, we are going to advertise it like that, like no pet and no smoking, even though our neighbors smoke a lot. But bueno, in our apartment, at least we are not going to allow them to smoke. But also no parties or events, they are not going to be allowed or permitted. And that's our rules.
Okay, so you're okay with incorporating those into your special
Yeah,
exception?
that is
Okay.
not a problem because they are the same rules that we are going to set up in the Airbnb. No pets, no smoking, no parties or events. It's exclusively for one single family or executive or any professional that would like to stay for a long period of time.
Okay. And how long were you looking to get a special exception? Under the code, you can get up to 10 years, but we haven't granted any of those yet. The most we've done, I think, is 5 years.
Well, if we can have 5, we will go with 5 if that's allowed.
Okay. Well, the last question I have, are you going to be giving all of these renters those parking passes so that they'll be on their cars?
It's just one at the time. So when we are renting the apartment, we are going to provide the parking permits so they don't bother the neighbor. And we were going to restrict it just one car at the time. So everybody is, I don't want to bother nobody. I'm trying to be a good citizen, so I don't want to bother the neighbors.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments? Okay. I guess they thought I grilled you well enough that there are no questions or comments. I will say thank you for hanging around for a very long meeting. You guys were unfortunately at the tail end of it.
We learned a lot, so that's good to know. We learned, if we want to build something, we have to check the zoning first. If you want to, build in a property, even if it's far away, kind of like in a farm, you have to meet a lot of considerations. So we learned a lot. So don't worry,
Good.
we like the meeting.
Good, good. Well, it sounds like we've got 2 more subscribers on our YouTube channel now that are going to watch all of our meetings. So that's good.
Thank you.
Board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
I can make the motion to approve the special exception for a period of 5 years.
Okay. I should say, I don't have anyone signed up to speak, but is there anyone on the line that wanted to speak on this application? Okay, so now we'll recognize your motion, Mr. Privet, for a period of 5 years. And Ms. Asbury, second.
It's
not clicking. Finally.
There it goes.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance in case number 14774 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 5 years. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please. Ms. Ybarra.
Oh, sorry. Are we incorporating those conditions from the application?
I almost asked that, but I suspect not because Mr. Privet didn't say anything, and I don't know that they're necessarily essential for us granting them.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
But yeah, I do appreciate it.
It kind of seems like it's set up for this to me, so I just kind of.
Yeah. So you don't intend to include those?
Well, we're talking parking restrictions.
This is just the, no pets, no smoking, no parties, that kind of.
Oh, yeah. Include her rules that she is.
Okay, so we'll incorporate the conditions that the applicant has imposed on themselves in the application. Do we need to re-vote on that? Rita?
Trying to find my button. Yes, you do, because you want to include all of it. You want her application to be approved, including the conditions that she indicated and that were a part of the motion.
Okay. So we'll clear this out and vote again. Oh, I guess it's back to being available to vote. So now it's approved with conditions to approve the special exception in case 14774 for a period of 5 years and incorporating the conditions imposed by the applicant in the application. It looks like everyone's voted. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay, I think the next application was continued. But- So that'll take us to additional items, which I see no additional items, communications and board reports. I see no communications or board reports. Are there any citizens that would like to be heard at this time? Okay.
I don't see any.
Okay. Other business, board members? All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
everyone.
See you guys.
See you.
Bye.